Emily, it turns out the LA Rams schedule is even more difficult than we all thought. We're going to break down how on today's episode of the Rams Report presented by PrizePicks. Guys, sign up for PrizePicks with code HMA and get $50 in lineups instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. But the reason why the Rams schedule is more difficult than we initially suspected, than we initially thought it was, is because after a little bit more analysis of this thing, after diving a little bit deeper into not just the opponents that we're going to face or the order that we're going to face them, but into something that we're going to discuss today called net rest differential, it gets even more difficult than we already knew it was, because we don't have a bit of an advantage that we had last season over our opponents. So that's what's on today's show. That's on the agenda for today's at-home edition of the Rams Report. But if you want more Rams news, if you want more Rams rumors, make sure you are subscribed. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button to join our Ramily of over 8,000 Rams fans. Shout out to you guys for helping us cross 8K very, very recently. Help us keep growing this channel, showing the offices at Chat Sports, showing the YouTube world that the Rams fan base is growing rapidly. I say it all the time. I think we're the fastest growing fan base in the NFL. I think that's proven by us getting 7 primetime games this year, The NFL making a big bet on the Rams and on the Rams fan base to show up for them on TV, which, hey, we absolutely are going to do that. We absolutely are, but it's going to be a difficult schedule. And one of the main reasons why is because of the rest differential. But let's take a look at this. So what is rest differential? If you're not familiar, I've said it a couple times now, you may be wondering, Jackson, what the hell does that mean? The difference in rest days on a week-to-week basis for NFL teams as compared to their opponents is defined as rest differential. So it's calculated by adding up the difference in rest days between each team and its opponents for all of their games. A highly positive number means the team gets more recovery and preparation time compared to the teams it faces. So in other words, if you're still not connecting on this idea, if it's still not making sense to you, think of it this way. If the Rams play on Thursday night football one week, and then the next week they play on Sunday against an opponent who had played on Sunday the week prior, they would have a rest advantage there, if that makes sense. They got a couple extra days, that Friday, that Saturday, over their opponent to get a little bit of extra rest. So that would be a +2 rest advantage on that week in general. And then you just do that for every single week. If you're at the same rest of your opponent, it's a 0 for that week, and you've totaled your rest advantage. So makes sense to everybody at this point, I would hope. Now let's talk about why it matters. Let's go back to last season and look at the top 5 teams for rest differential in the NFL. Number 1 was the Detroit Lions, who had a +13 rest differential last season. They went 9-8. The Dolphins were second with a +11. They went 7-10. The Los Angeles Rams were third. We had a +10 rest differential. We went 12-5. The Niners had a +9 rest differential. They also went 12-5. And in fifth, the Seattle Seahawks, they had a +8 rest differential. They went 14-3. The top 5 teams for rest differential last season went 54-31, and they averaged 11-6 records. Let's quickly compare to the bottom 5. Browns, they had a -7 rest differential. They went 5-12. The Bills were at the same. They were the only team in the bottom 5, spoiler alert, to make the playoffs or to have a winning record. They went 12-5 with a -7 rest differential. The Commanders had a -13 rest differential and went 5-12. The Saints had a -14 rest differential and went 6-11. And the Raiders had a whopping -19 rest differential and went 3-14. The bottom 5 teams went 31-54 and averaged 6-11 records. We're going to continue to discuss the role that rest differential plays in determining your record and determining how good you are year to year in just one second, because it's absolutely huge. But before we do, I got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, guys, and that is PrizePicks. Guys, I love playing with America's #1 sports picks app, PrizePicks. And if you love daily fantasy sports or you just want to add more excitement to watching sports, you've got to join me on PrizePicks. It's a great time to get started on PrizePicks too. The NBA playoffs are in full swing and the baseball season is underway as well. And there's just no better place to get in on all that action than with our friends at PrizePicks. And guys, it's never been an easier to play than it is with PrizePicks. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players. You're selecting more or less on their stat projections, whether it's points, assists, rebounds, or hits, home runs, or strikeouts. They've got plenty of options from all your favorite sports. Plus, they also have awesome social media features. You can easily tail or fade your friends or your favorite creators, including me. I'm Jackson Durham on there with no spaces, and you can see all of my latest lineups, including this one that I've got going for the playoff action tonight. We're going with the more on Cade Cunningham and his three-pointers. We're also going with the more on PrizePicks' discounted pick for Cade Cunningham. All he has to do is score 1 point for that one to go. So that one is absolutely a must-have in your lineups, in my opinion. And then we're also going with the more on James Harden's 19 points. So you guys can tail or fade on this lineup. It's 22 win 85. Whatever you do, just do it with our friends at PrizePicks. And if you're new to PrizePicks, make sure to use our promo code when you download the app today. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with PrizePicks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments and in the description below. As always, thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's show. Let's get back to our discussion of rest differential and the role that it plays. So obviously, immediately you can tell there is a big gulf between the teams that had the highest rest differential last season and the teams that had the worst rest differential last season. A gulf that literally flips their average records. With the top 5 teams last year going 11-6 on average, 3 of those 5 were playoff teams. Everybody won at least 7 games. And then you go to the bottom 5, only 1 team wins more than 6 games, and 4 of them miss the postseason. And something else that they had in common across the board, and it's not surprising when you start to think about it, is they all struggled with injuries. Excuse me. Almost all of these 5 teams in the bottom 5 for rest differential had serious injuries last season play a role in their lack of success. Excuse me. Quinshon Judkins went down for the Browns. They also lost Jawan Jones, 2 significant injuries, but overall that was a bad football team. Not a huge part of the reason why they didn't succeed, but you go to Washington. Jaden Daniels out. Marshawn Lattimore missed time. Luke McCaffrey missed time. Austin Eckler missed time. Dorrance Armstrong missed time. It was a litany of injuries for the Washington Commanders that knocked them off course from last season, where they were phenomenal out of nowhere, to being a disaster this year, going 5-12. You look at New Orleans, Eric McCoy, Kendre Miller, Alvin Kamara, they all missed time. And then you go to the Raiders, I think maybe the most egregious example of this, Max Crosby, Brock Bowers, Colton Miller, Jeremy Chin, all of those guys missing significant time in 2025. All of that, I don't think, not influenced by the fact that the Raiders had a negative 19 rest differential. That's absurd. It's a crazy, crazy disadvantage for them as a team. But why does it matter for the Rams? Well, let's look at 2026's rest differential. Keep in mind, we had a plus 10 in 2025. The top 5 for 2026, the Bears are at plus 15. The Bills are at plus 14. Nice shift for them back towards having a good rest advantage after having a terrible one last year. The Cowboys are at plus 11.5. The Commanders, who also had a bad rest disadvantage last season, are at plus 10. And the Patriots are at plus 8.5. The bottom 5 for this season is the Saints at negative 8. The Jets at negative 9.5. The Raiders, once again, at negative 13.5. That is a brutal 2-year stretch for them. The Eagles are at negative 15 and the Chargers are at negative 24, but we're right in that neighborhood at negative 6 for our rest differential. So not quite as bad as some of the teams in the bottom 5. Like, thank God we're not the Saints, Jets, especially not the Raiders, Eagles, or my Lord, the Chargers at negative 24. That is going to be tough to overcome, especially for a team that's already had injury woes over the last couple of years. But a negative 6 rest differential does not play to your favor anywhere near the way a plus 10 one does. That is an enormous goal. If you're moving 16 days worth of rest backwards from last season. But here's the deal, right? Like, You look across the board last season for the bottom 5 teams, as much as I've just talked about how concerning this is, and I do think it is concerning, it's not the end all be all. Just because you get more rest or you get less rest doesn't automatically determine your success. It absolutely plays a significant role in it. But think about the Niners last season. They were in that top 5 that we mentioned in 2025. What happened to that team? They were ravaged by injuries, absolutely ravaged by injuries. That team dealt with, it felt like everybody missed time for them at points last season. And I know we've all heard them complain about it, but it's absolutely true. They really, really went through the ringer as far as injuries were concerned. It's impressive that they stayed in the race. I think we can acknowledge that, even though we don't like that team. But again, they did that with a rest advantage. And maybe you could say that Substation played a role if you want to go in that route. I'm not doing that. But I do think at the end of the day, it's not the end all be all. At the end of the day, being a little bit more rest disadvantaged doesn't automatically mean the Rams are going to be significantly worse than they were last year. But I do think as a team, when you add it in with some of the other factors at play for the Rams, it just definitely doesn't help, right? Like the schedule is already really hard. I think that's number one. Like you're already staring down the 4th most difficult schedule in the NFL this year, even before you consider some of the other factors that we're going to discuss, and even before you consider rest advantage or rest differential, because that's not factored into strength of schedule calculations by most companies, especially not by ESPN, who we're going off right now. But you also got to add in intense travel requirements for the Rams. We've talked about this a lot. We're second most in terms of travel mileage in 2026. The second year in a row that we're going to travel more than 34,000 miles during the course of the season, of which 22,500 are going to come on our trips to Melbourne in week 1, our trip to Philadelphia in week 4, and our trip to Tampa Bay at the end of the season, each of those totaling at least 2,000 miles. And the Melbourne trip alone will total over 15,000 miles there and back. It's a whopping journey. But again, you're dealing with the significant rest disadvantage. You face, and here's how that actually plays out, because we didn't go through the mechanics of it. So why are the Rams rest disadvantaged this year? Well, we face the Chargers off a bye in week 8, so that doesn't help. They're coming in with that immediately is -7 on its own. We also face the Cowboys off a bye in week 15. So again, that is 2 weeks where you got to watch out there. Week 8 and week 15 are sleeper weeks for the Rams, because you're going to face a team that I think at the end of the day is very beatable for you. I would say we're better than the Chargers. We're better than the Cowboys if you just want to stack up rosters. And I don't even really think it's close. But when you're dealing with a team that's coming off of 7 days worth of rest and 7 extra days worth of prep just for you and just for your team, whereas you've prepped for them for the last 6 days because you're coming off your game, they've prepped for you for 13 days. They've spent 13 days thinking about you. That's not a favorable situation. You look historically, teams coming off buys are generally quite successful. There's some coaches that go against the grain on that one, but at the end of the day, we know that to be true. So that makes 2 otherwise very winnable games a little bit more nerve-wracking for your Los Angeles Rams. And then lastly, I think you got to talk about this, even though we don't like talking about it. We have a roster that's especially vulnerable to injury. At 38 years old, Matthew Stafford turned 38 in early February of this year. If he goes down, there's no Super Bowl this season. It's as simple as that. You know what I mean? Like, if Matthew Stafford gets hurt and it's significant, you don't win a Super Bowl this year. Like, Ty Simpson is not ready to lead this team to the promised land. Stetson Bennett will never be ready to lead this team to the promised land, in my opinion. At this point, I don't see it with Stetson Bennett, and I don't think the Rams do either. But you also have issues with Devontae Adams. Even if Matthew Stafford stays healthy, if Devontae Adams was to get hurt, he'll turn 34 on Christmas Eve of this year. That would become a massive issue. If that was to become an injury situation, you're dealing with an immediate depth issue at receiver. Puka can't carry that room alone at the end of the day. I mean, he's already going to have to do some heavy lifting, considering the depth just isn't there. But if Tay was to go down and it's Puka, Jordan Whittington, Kanate Mupfield, Xavier Smith, is anyone confident in that receiver room beyond Puka? I really don't think so. So at the end of the day, I think it's just something to consider. If I'm the Rams, I'm looking at this rest disadvantage as, okay, depth is as important as it's ever been. Maybe Matthew Stafford is a do or die situation where if he goes down, there's just nothing you could have done. at the end of the day. You're not going to go out there and find a quarterback that I think is going to provide equivalent value to Matthew Stafford. I think this is the case for a lot of NFL teams, but at 38 years old, it's always going to be a little bit more injury vulnerable. I don't like to talk about this any more than you guys do, but it's the reality of our situation. And I don't think pretending it isn't the case is helpful at the end of the day. But I do think you can be more prepared for a possible injury to Davante Adams. If that was to come up, you can mitigate that risk by continuing to address depth. There's still solid options out there at receiver. We're going to continue to talk about that this week as we get into our coverage of the Rams throughout the week. Make sure you are tuned in. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button, because we will be here for a video every single day, just like always. Can't wait to see you guys then. But that's going to round it out for us on this one. Thank you for tuning in. We discussed some rest differential. Hopefully, everyone, I think at the end of the day, it's not controversial. You'll rest a little bit less than your opponents, makes the schedule, which is already difficult, even more difficult than it already is. I do feel like the Rams are the most talented team in the NFL, and they're prepared to face a difficult schedule, even one that doesn't provide them the help of extra rest, but it just adds a little bit more layers to this schedule. The schedule is like an onion at the end of the day. It's like, or an ogre, if for my Shrek fans out there. It's got a lot of layers. So we'll continue to discuss it. We'll continue to get ready for this Rams 2026 season. I absolutely cannot wait to get some football going, even though we're a long, long way away. But stay tuned with us. We will be here all off season. Let's go Rams.